On Point is brought to you by Dargin Global.
A very good evening and welcome to another episode of On Point. I'm your host, Patria K.
And I'm Dennis Chung.
And we've got lots to talk about, Dennis.
Yes, quite a few things happening. I mean, the Shaggy Foundation and Shaggy, you listen to the press conference that Shaggy gave. I'm a little disappointed in our media because one of the things he said, if what he's saying is true, is that he had given the story from his point of view.
And we're
also,
talking about this matter with the Bustamante Children's Hospital. 2 years ago, the last Shaggy and Friends concert, the funds collected from that have not yet been spent on the Bustamante Children's Hospital, and questions are being asked about why. The story that came out by the Gleaner suggested that that money had been used raised that kind of question, and people were investigating and expressing shock over that. That press conference now that you're talking about. That
is a press conference I'm talking about. And
to clear the air.
What he said, the reason he gave is a legitimate reason. That, the money just was not sufficient to buy the number of beds they wanted. And also that the hospital did not have the space to accommodate any more beds.
Because what was communicated at that concert, and I was there, was that the money was earmarked to buy ICU beds, not just any hospital beds, specifically ICU beds, but that was contingent on the expansion of the Bustamante Children's Hospital ICU.
Which has not happened.
That expansion, 24 months later, has still not happened. And the hospital apparently went to Shaggy and said, all right, use the money and do some other things. And he said no.
Which is correct. Because you give people, you sold it to people that you are going to use it for this reason. And he rightly should use it for that reason.
And I understand, having been to the ICU at Bustamante Children's Hospital myself, I see the need. It's not uncommon to see mothers sitting on a chair holding their child in their lap because there are not available beds. And it's a space where, specifically in the ICU, where you're talking about life and death, the beds are needed. And I guess in the wisdom of the Shaggy Foundation team, if you spend the money now on something else, that need still exists for those ICU beds, the most critical, most vulnerable of patients.
Of what it was said that the money was going to be raised.
What I hate most about this is Shaggy's benevolence. I can't think of any other Jamaican who has used their celebrity power to personally agitate for that kind of change, to make that kind of a difference in a real way for an institution in Jamaica, and an institution like the Bustamante Children's Hospital. And the tradition has been, they have never handed over cash to the hospital. They have always said, what do you need? Purchased that thing and handed it over, irrespective of how much money they have raised. So this seemingly smear campaign on the objectives, on the intentions.
It was wrong.
It was just wrong.
But as Jamaicans, we always find a way to mess up a good thing. Basically that's how we did. The other thing is the situation with Carrie Douglas.
Bustamante again.
There's obviously blame on both sides. But you can understand more from Carrie's point of view. If you have children, to see your children going through that and not getting the comforting words, the service level.
The explanation.
It must be difficult.
Absolutely, and I understand
I can empathize with her.
The medical professionals are stretched and stressed.
Yeah, but even so, you have to, if you excuse that, then you can excuse the fact that you say policemen are stressed, so they're going to abuse people.
I think there's a cold demeanor with folks, particularly who work in the medical profession, that they have been accused of, and in very many instances rightly so, because You as a parent, you as a patient,
yeah.
you don't understand the extent of what's happening to you. And so you are in panic. And a big part of, even before the cure, is to allay fears.
Yes.
And I don't think that happens enough. There is an empathy that is required by people who work in the medical profession that often escapes them because the job is tough.
And even before this, you have heard a lot about, incidents at the Bustamante Children's Hospital.
Well, folks, there's a lot to talk about in the show. We're not touching any of those things. What we are touching is a trip that the Prime Minister had to China. He led a high-powered delegation to China to take a look at some of the possibilities of Jamaica getting involved even more in the China-Jamaica relations. What's the future for that? We'll explore more on Point.
Then later, I'll be switching roles as we look at some issues affecting the National Solid Waste Management Agency. But first, let's take a look back at some of the top business stories of the week.
At number 5, the maker of Mercedes-Benz says it plans to cut jobs to save more than 1 billion euros by the end of 2022. The move comes as the German luxury car maker grapples with an expensive switch to greener vehicles. The company has also been hit by expensive recalls, a slowing global market, and an 870 million euros fine in September for having sold vehicles that did not conform with legal emissions limits. At number 4, Italy has declared a state of emergency in Venice after the Italian city was engulfed by 6 feet high water levels, flooding its historic sites, forcing tourists to flee and cutting power to homes. Venice's mayor blamed climate change for the floods, saying it will leave, quote, a permanent mark on the city. Meanwhile, in declaring the state of emergency, Italy's prime minister said individuals affected could claim up to 5,000 euros and businesses up to 20,000 euros in compensation. At number 3, the 11th BRICS Summit got underway in Brazil today under the theme Economic Growth for an Innovative Future. The 5 BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, account for almost 50% of the world's economic growth. China's President Xi Jinping used the summit's opening day to argue that bullying tactics have eroded international trade and investment, while Russia's President Vladimir Putin claimed international growth has been in decline for almost 2 years. At number 2, stronger penalties are coming for persons found to have stolen equipment and infrastructure used by telecom service providers in Jamaica. Minister of Science, Energy and Technology Favour Williams says the government plans to shore up the existing policy and regulatory framework to protect investments in the sector and ensure more reliable connectivity for customers. And your number 1 story this week is the continuing slide of the Jamaican dollar. There are increased jitters in the foreign exchange market as the value of the Jamaican dollar dips to record lows. The Bank of Jamaica has intervened by pumping some $40 million into the market, while pointing out that the slide is due to added demands being placed on the market by banks making larger than usual purchases.
When we come back, the deepening China-Jamaica relations, we'll explore it right here on Point. Welcome back to On Point, folks. Now, Prime Minister Andrew Holness led a high-powered delegation to China last week, taking a look at relations between the two countries and the potential. Take a look at the highlights of the trip.
The Jamaican government is hailing Prime Minister Andrew Holness's official visit to China as a huge success. The administration says the two governments have agreed to focus efforts on increasing trade, particularly to encourage more Jamaican goods and services to be exported to the Chinese market. An important aspect of the Prime Minister's visit was to address the opening ceremony of the China International Import Exposition, where JAMPRO and many Jamaican private sector companies showcased Jamaica's products and services. The 5-day China International Import Expo held in Shanghai is one of that country's largest international events, where other countries come to promote their interest in doing business with China. China is expected to import products and services valuing more than $10 trillion over the next 5 years, and Jamaica wants its share of that pie. Meanwhile, on the investment side, Prime Minister Holness says cooperation on infrastructure will continue. However, the government of Jamaica would not negotiate any new loan programs with Chinese partners. He says under the new cooperation framework, investments will be more strategic and focused on the development of special economic zones and logistics hubs, urban center development, water and sewerage, agriculture and affordable housing. There are also plans for deeper cooperation in education, sports, and climate change resilience building through greater application of technology.
Joining us now to talk about the China trip is JAMPRO President Dan Edwards, who was also a part of the delegation. Welcome to On Point, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. Your own summation of that trip, having gone, what's the takeaway for Jamaica, the big one?
Well, the big takeaway is that the Chinese market is seriously open. Remember that this is a state-run economy. Remember that the Communist Party controls that country. So when the government says to the people of China, you need to import more from Jamaica, believe me, they have to move.
So they have said that?
Yes, basically the president, first of all, remember that this is the second China International Import Fair. This is the only real import fair in the world. No other country is going out there saying, we're opening our country to imports.
Send us stuff.
Send us stuff. So come to our country, exhibit to us what you have to offer us, and we will invite our importers in to come and look at what you have.
So let me ask you a question then. I mean, we have had quotas over the years, banana and sugar and all that, and we have not been able to meet the quotas. Mm-hmm. Are we able to supply the Chinese market? Because we
can't ever become a mass market.
Yeah, but even moderate quantities, we're inconsistent.
We are, absolutely, and we know all the challenges. But to export more, we have to produce more.
What do they want other than coffee and lobster?
They want, they like the rum, actually. The president liked the rum. That helps. They are looking for a lot of fresh fruit. They love fresh produce and fresh fruit. They eat a lot of it. They are interested in meat, like pork. There is a shortage of pork in China. There is a shortage of seafood. So any kind of produce that comes out of the sea, they're interested in. Yeah, so something like sea cucumbers, we should be farming sea cucumbers, but it comes back to Dennis's point, which is production. We have got to produce.
Can we do it at a price point that's attractive to them? We've heard the coffee folks crying that over the years, the price has gone a direction that has not made them happy. Can we do any of these other things that they have an interest in at a price point that makes it profitable for the Jamaican manufacturer?
We're actually exporting lobsters, processed lobsters to them now. So most of those lobsters are coming from Caribbean waters, not necessarily Jamaican, but they're processing them here and they're shipping them. One of the things we have to understand is that most of the containers go back, most of the ships, go back to China empty.
And they come here full.
And they come here full. So the point is, because they're empty, we have preferential freight rates. In fact, I'm going to research this more, but I've been told that the freight rates into China are probably better than we're getting going into the US.
But I'll come back to the point then. I don't know if we have the capacity to fill it. The problem Jamaica has, I mean, we're not, you know, a lot of people say we're not a real country, right? Because we want to compete and we tell people to eat Jamaican. But at the same time, our politics says that every man must get a 5-acre land. So a 5-acre land man is competing against a 100-acre man land in another country, right?
Well, my conviction is that we have to restructure agriculture. We have to restructure it to bigger farms.
But it's more than that. It's more than that.
It is more than that.
The man produces pigs and somebody steal it and there's no consequence for it. Or we start doing something and then the union step in and halt production.
Well, we know what all the problems are, and I'm not saying that we have a solution to every problem.
No, but is the government prepared to address those issues up front? Because we had an IMF agreement in 2013 that said that, and we're wondering why we don't have growth now. But in 2013, a big part of the IMF agreement was labor market reform. We haven't touched it to date.
That's true, and I think that that is one of the underpinnings of
that is a
successful economy. And I know I've seen a lot of what you've written about productivity, and that is critical. Yeah. Productivity is a critical ingredient in moving the country forward. But I also think we have to look at agriculture as a business, and I don't think we have looked at it that way. I think we have looked at it as subsistence farming, and therefore, as you say, every man has his 5 acres, and I'm not fighting against a small man, let me say that. However, what I think we have to do is to restructure so that we have larger farms, anchor farms, and satellite farms around them, because we have to have more technology in agriculture. If you look at the yields we get in agriculture right now, we are a highly inefficient producer. We have to improve the yields and become more efficient at producing what we produce.
It's more than efficiency. When you look at the Chinese market, it is very similar in terms of the perfect fruit, the perfect vegetable, because it is a market that appreciates that kind of thing, more demand that kind of thing. And we still have a challenge with that kind of farming here in Jamaica. How do we bridge that gap to make our products attractive to that market?
I think it comes back to understanding the market, and comes back to the size and efficiency of farms. So there are some farms now we are seeing, because the economy is changing, because money is more available now and chasing productive enterprise, you see more interest of large and medium-sized companies in going into agriculture. And those companies are putting in the technology to achieve the yields and to achieve what you're talking about. So uniformity in size, uniformity in the yields, uniformity in the plants, cloning, tissue culture, these are the things that create the kind of produce that you're talking about.
Let me
that
ask.
Looks pretty, that is attractive, that is all the same size. And then you have to grade and sort according to what you're getting. But once you have a cloned product, they will be identical.
I want to ask about the manufacturing opportunities. The chain is going to be challenging when we talk about language barriers. And also, all right, so you've sent a container of goods there, and then what? What's in place for us to be able to not only enter the market, but be successful so that container 1 becomes container 10, becomes container 15, becomes a sustainable stream of goods going there?
Well, what Jampro can do is help you to enter the market. There are a number of wholesalers, there are a number of importers. What we've done is we've done some market research. We've looked at the products that we think we can take to the market. And we've looked at the distribution channels. What you have to understand is how the channels work in the same way that we attack any other market.
But Dan, on that point, I think Jampro has done a very good job, right? And kudos to you in terms of opening up, and you talk about it a lot and thing, and you get people access to markets. But if you were to tell us honestly now about the people that you've gotten access to markets, what percentage of them have been successful? And tell us honestly.
Yeah, a very small percentage, a shockingly small percentage, but there are reasons for that. One is that I think that people are inadequately prepared for export. They don't understand what it means, they don't take the time to do their research. And even if we do have, doing business in Cuba, doing business in Dominican Republic, Canada, US, etc., people are not systematic about a market, and they're not thinking medium to long term. So they want a quick result.
It's a hustle.
Is a hustle, exactly. Whereas, I spent 10 years with Ray and Nephew building a brand. The brand don't finish building. There's never an end to finish building a brand. Coca-Cola is still advertising, Pepsi is still advertising. So it's a long-term thing, and we are not taking a position that we are going to go after a market and stick with it until we get market share. There are a few exceptions. I could name you, and you know the companies.
It's the legacy brands.
It's the legacy brands.
It is the legacy brands. And the legacy brands have budget, have name, have people, have structure, have time.
But not only that, Patria, they have someone who, when they make their first money, they're not going to go buy a Benz or a...
But we're also talking about this misnomer where the conversation is entrepreneurship and SMEs are going to be the engine of growth. But at the same time, it is the legacy brands. It is the...
But let me say something else. You see, we don't like to cooperate and collaborate in Jamaica. Some of the biggest companies, agribusiness company, okay, the second largest exporter of food in the world is where? Netherlands. Netherlands after the United States. You see the difference in size between those two. Netherlands is 14 million people, but they grow in greenhouses. They grow in controlled atmosphere agriculture. They have cloning, tissue culture, the whole technology. And then they have cooperatives. So SMEs, you're not going to succeed each
sending a pallet.
Sending a pallet or half a container. That's not how you're going to succeed. You have to come together and create critical mass. And this is one of the challenges that we have had at JAMPRO. We can take the horse to water, we take them in, we show them, we introduce them to importers, etc. But will they come together and say, okay, can I reduce my cost by buying together or packaging, buying our raw material together? So some buying groups, I don't want to call them cooperatives, I know this has a bad name in Jamaica, but let's say buying groups, okay? Buy together your raw material, your inputs, because you'll get a better price. Then you go together and say, okay, maybe my brand won't do it, but if the 10 of us put together and have one brand, we can take a market share.
But
I don't see that thinking happening.
But you know, I tell you something, where we are today, I blame the politicians and bad government policy, right? Because the argument is that if you try and put things in place to move towards greater productivity, the opposition will always get up, whoever is in opposition, and say you're fighting against a small man, right? And then all they talk about, oh, you want lower interest rates. Interest rates can't come much lower, you know. They don't see the challenge of the capacity and the infrastructure, and they're not addressing those things. So I come back to this concern all the while. I mean, we go on these trade shows and everything, and at the end of the day, the value that we get from it is very limited. I mean, even with our athletics.
We do have some success stories, okay? It's not all doom and gloom. So for instance, if you look at seafood, definitely, I would say that is somewhat of a success story.
So Rainforest has done
very well because they have a business model that is viable, that works, and they have grown their market share very well, and they've gotten some very good contracts. There are companies like, let's take another one. There is a company called Pedro Plains. No one knows it in Jamaica because they export everything they produce. They don't really worry about getting shelf space in Jamaica, but they've gone about it systematically, developed a brand for the marketplace, and then they've systematically gone about, how do I develop that brand? How do I promote that brand?
What's in this for China?
What's in it for China? I'm sure China wants to expand its reach globally. They're a global powerhouse. They want to rival the US as a big power.
So and I asked a question of you being in the delegation because eyebrows are raised often. Certainly when the trip was announced, the eyebrows were raised. Being very generous with loans, great rates, infrastructure investment, not just in Jamaica, but you call up any Caribbean neighbor and they'll say built by China, road, building, hurricane relief, free hospital. It's happening across the region. And the disclosure as to what's in it for China hasn't been very transparent, not just in Jamaica, but across the region. Did you get a sense of what's in this for China?
I think China wants to increase its influence in the world. And I think China wants to be, and is now, a global power.
So therefore, is that going to conflict with what was being talked about with the US in terms of the US from their political point of view and the views that were expressed that the US is saying to Jamaica, back off, you're getting too close to China?
Is it going to conflict? There will always be rivalry between superpowers. And so I don't think we should be surprised that there is a rivalry. And I don't think we should be surprised either that Jamaica, because of its geopolitical location and position in terms of the influence that we have in the developing world and in the region, that we are to some extent caught up in it. I think we need to, as Richard Bernal said the other day, we need to balance our relationship and have multilateral relationships, relationships with a number of countries.
The fear, particularly with the China relationship, is that it's one-sided because the potential is there for us to exploit a market of how many million people and tap into that. But there are so many things that we have to fix with our agriculture, with our manufacturers, there are so many things that we must fix before we start to benefit from that relationship. That makes you think we're chasing a dead horse, we're flogging a dead horse. China will continue to be the one-sided benefactor of this relationship until and unless we fix those things. And those things don't look like they're going to be fixed in the next 2, 3, 5 years.
I don't necessarily agree with you.
2, 3, 5 years or decades.
No, I don't agree with you. One reason I don't agree with you is that we're being extremely deliberate about the doing business agenda and how do we improve how do we reform the business environment in Jamaica and make it easier to start and to operate and be successful in business? And there are a number of things that go into that. One of them is trading across borders, which is our worst performing indicator. So we have got to continue the reform agenda and build that ease of doing business. That's one. And the second thing is we have to be deliberate about production and increasing production in some of the ways that I've said. And thirdly, I would say we have to also focus on a certain number of markets where the access is easier.
So
we have moved away from quotas. There are no more quotas and there are no more preferential access.
We know what needs to be done.
Yes.
Build out the roadmap. So you know what needs to be done, and the manufacturer and the person on the farm knows that they're not making enough money. How do the twain meet? What actually happens now to ensure that we're not having this conversation next year with no change?
Okay, I'm not saying that JAMPRO is the panacea. We have a certain part of the whole agenda that we can deal with. We are not the government, and we cannot speak for the government. But what we have done, we have developed a national export strategy. We know what we have to do. I do not think the country is paying sufficient, deliberate attention to putting in place the building blocks to ensure that exporting is easier. Most SMEs, as you know yourself through your own experience,
know it well.
It's hard to export from Jamaica. If we make it easier, if we start to fix some of those things, and that takes a deliberate policy and political will and financing. It's all of these.
But then the governments are not prepared to do that. I'm saying to you, we have the parliamentarians sitting down there and they are not concerned with productivity.
Because even when we take a look at what's happening with the Jamaican dollar.
Well, then I throw it back in your court because the private sector has to lobby. You know, the private sector in Jamaica is once again not really united. You see, in the UK, the Confederation of British Industry is a hugely powerful organization. You know, when they talk, like I tell you, say the government job. Okay, they do have to listen. We have a disparate private sector. I think the private sector is coming together more now. I see there is more unity and they're speaking with one voice. I think the private sector has to go out there and say to the government, you guys need to do more about export. You guys need to make this and this and this and this easier for us to be able to export. You want growth? We can deliver you growth, but here's our recipe.
Let's look at the dollar that's 142 and we're fighting to bring down the import bill. Let's export more. If we export more, that 142 changes and changes
without productivity increase, that's the problem.
Yeah, but I'm saying that the private sector has got to go out there and lobby for this. This morning we had a very good meeting with certain stakeholders, mostly from the private sector, to discuss our platform for promoting exports. And that's what we have to do. We have to get really deliberate, and it's going to have to be a private-public endeavor because the government can't do it alone, but the government won't do it unless the private sector keeps pushing.
Dan, thank you so much for your time.
Very
we look forward to the fruits of that China trip
stimulating
over the next.
To
Thank you so much.
We'll
take a break, folks, on Points. When we come back, I put Dennis in the hot seat. We're talking garbage. Thank you so much for staying with us, folks. Well, the National Solid Waste Management Authority, they've come under some fire for uncollected garbage in a couple of areas across Jamaica. We're trying to understand how could that have happened. And we're looking forward to the Christmas season that comes with a whole lot of garbage. How prepared is the NSWMA to deal with that? He's not in the interviewer's seat right now. He's actually over there, the chairman of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, my co-host Dennis Chung, but not right now. And I also have with me the executive director of the NSWMA, Audley Gordon. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Let me start, first of all, with the fire that you would have come under recently. There have been people in some communities saying, my garbage has gone uncollected for weeks. Mm-hmm. What causes that?
Okay, so in all fairness, the complaints that you would have had in recent weeks are in large measure justifiable. We encountered a bit of difficulty from the persistent rains that we've had. Recall that we have almost 2 months non-stop of real heavy rains, which slows everything down, not just the NSWMA. A journey that formerly would have taken you 15 minutes, it take you an hour and a half, even 2 hours. Now, if moving around a large truck is bad in good times, just imagine when you have the kind of traffic jam that you have to encounter when rain. Then you have the roadworks. Then you have the interior roads at the disposal facility, which are really dirt tracks that get very soggy when you have the heavy rains, a lot of mud. You have trucks stuck in mud. We have to use heavy duty equipment to push trucks out. We did issue a release outlining some of the challenges that we have. But you know, garbage is so emotive. Nobody wants it around. We generate it, but we don't want it near to us. So notwithstanding the release and our explanation, we still came under a bit of a fire. But we understand it. We understand the impatience when it comes to garbage. And what we did, we put in the measures that we could put in terms of rearranging some of the cells on the landfill and try to do more night collections and all the little things that we can do to sort of alleviate the problem, because we're not getting into a confrontation with the public, because there was a problem.
Some of the people who complained, their big issue was that repeatedly I'm being missed. So no collection this week, and you lay out some of the issues. But next week you still don't collect from me, and the week after you still don't collect from me. Who kind of monitors? What's the system to monitor who's been missed to ensure that you pick up the slack?
Okay, so we do have a fairly credible system to monitor. We have the zonal monitors who really take charge of a zone. You have the public cleansing managers who will be the next upline. And then you have the regional operations managers. Then you have a director of operations. All those kicked in at different times. At the very lowest end, you have the zonal monitors who would know where a truck is, where it's supposed to be. Now, it could be that when you're fighting a backlog, that you have to be cleaning an area for a protracted period, where you take probably a day to clean an area. Maybe you're taking 3 days to clean that area. So you will find that you have those little things happening, and a schedule will get really off, and people will be overlooked in a process that is really tight, and you're trying to squeeze in more time, you're trying to beat the clock, everything. But we don't really have much of that, to be honest, because the monitors will be there to verify and to check to see if an area wasn't finished today, you go start it back in the morning, next morning. So you wouldn't have much of that. But where it happens again, we don't get into a confrontation.
Hold a second. What do you feel when you hear people describe Jamaica as nasty? Describe the capital as a nasty city?
It's true. It is very true. One of the things that Audley didn't mention, one of the reasons why our trucks are not as productive as they should is because people don't containerize the garbage. So if you go to even in New York, they put garbage on the sidewalks, right? But it's packaged properly in bags. So when a garbage man goes on a road in Jamaica, he spends an hour collecting because they have to shovel up, right? Dogs and all those things, right? So the garbage spread all over the place. In New York, the same amount of garbage or more is on the sidewalks in the city, but it's in bags. People just come, and pick them up and throw them in the
Part
truck.
of why they do it
Yeah.
is because if you don't, the law is coming for you.
Yeah.
What support is there? And is it enforceable?
We don't have much support because we issue maybe 300 tickets a month,
Right.
but the fine is like $3,000. So you're going.
budget for the
pay-
tickets.
Yeah, you pay your $3,000 and, you know, there's no real consequence. It's not that our enforcement officers are not out there doing the work, but there's no consequence.
And that ticket is issued to who?
To individuals, or even people who dump their garbage illegally, or business people who don't have commercial arrangements, which they should. Some of the business people themselves carry the garbage from their business and dump it in the city at a skip and fill it up. So, as Arlie just said, you will pass. I was driving in Montego Bay one day, and I passed a skip that was cleared in the morning, and 2 hours after, I saw the skip empty and garbage around it. If that is not nasty, I don't know what to tell you. Every night, our cleaners, street cleaners, clean cities, towns like Montego Bay and Ochias, and by the next day, they're dirty again.
What's the fix? Because we've been talking about the problems, not just today. We've been talking about the name calling, nasty Jamaica, nasty Kingston. We've done the campaigns. You have increased your budget, your trucks, your all kinds of things. What's the fix, considering that every day we generate garbage?
All right, so take a look at other jurisdictions. You're talking about the Singapores, the Swedens, the Canadas. All of them have the kind of legislative framework that is robust when it comes on to solid waste management.
So people are clean because they're afraid of the law?
So that's one. Yes, we have to enforce. We have to have laws, good, strong laws, regulations that we can enforce.
And not a $3,000 ticket?
No, we need that. We need to have something that deter people. But secondly, we need this robust, sustained public education campaign.
To tell people that they shouldn't be nasty?
Not for a day, not for a year, but you keep it there and you galvanize your entire country around that set of ideals. So it's not something that you have just a few voices here talking about. All critical voices in society come around that issue and push it.
But I'm sure you've been driving already and see people just throw things out of a car.
Easily. What I've never seen them throw out the window is a glass bottle, a beer bottle.
Yeah.
Because not deterrent, not public education, but incentivizing them to not be nasty. You can return a glass bottle for cash. And I ask the question, is there a model in garbage collection that can make it profitable for the generator of garbage and also for NSWMA?
The legislative framework would charge people a lot of money. That would make it profitable.
But that wouldn't make it profitable for me, the person who...
Yes, because if you don't throw the garbage out there, keep that
It's
money
a
in your
deterrent.
pocket.
I'm saying, is there cash in garbage? A lot of the conversation that we've been talking about recycling and all of this hasn't fleshed out to the consumer whether or not there is an economic benefit to be had from garbage. In the same way that you can get your money back for a glass bottle. Can you get money back for a plastic bottle?
They can,
for paper?
There was a few years ago, you would have seen people accumulating plastic bottles all around the place. The price of plastic went down, and with that comes the interest. But before we get to this incentivizing thing, we need to hold people accountable for the solid waste that they generate. Currently, nobody does that. Everybody turn on the agency and give the people the impression that somehow they have no part to play in this equation. When I talk about galvanizing the society around a set of ideals and hold people to account for it, both legislatively and in terms of the communication that we push, is to begin to look at people and call them out for their bad behavior. It is not cool to litter, irrespective And everybody from the parson to the principal of the school, the policeman, the councillor, the MP, everybody should be singing off the same page. Don't tell people, so you go into an area, you see some garbage scattered all over the place. One bag of garbage scattered out create the aesthetic disorder and the whole flies, the maggot, the rodents, everything. That 20 bag of garbage properly containerized would not have done.
Yes.
So there is an argument for containerization. What is so hard in that? You at source taking responsibility for just properly packaging your garbage.
The garbage.
What's so difficult in that? And we have to communicate it in a way that people make that nexus between the widespread just throwing out of stuff and the rodents that cause leptospirosis.
Mosquito.
We have to make the connection between the mosquito that will bite you and kill you. We have to make the nexus between the flies that is so offensive and the maggots and all them things. People have not yet gotten to the place where they understand that their bad behavior is what caused the dengue to bite that little girl, that little boy, and kill them.
But Patria, I mean, it's not garbage alone enough, because you hear the stories of people who still have breeding sites of mosquitoes around their house and refuse to do anything about it, or refuse to let the Ministry of Health in, even though dengue killing everybody.
Right. We in the last dengue cleanup, Chairman just spoke to this dengue thing. We went to our premises and we found 43 tires, old tires, in the back of the yard. When we shake one of the tires, the amount of mosquitoes that get out of everything is like, is war the mosquito declare on us instead of we. And I'm saying, what could cause a household to have that many old tires in the backyard after we had the experience of Chick-V when half the country couldn't walk? So there is an argument for personal response. We must begin to call out people and say, no, pack your garbage up properly. Stop doing that. Don't keep the old fridge, the old stove, and so don't keep it in your backyard. If we keep sending the truck for it every time and keep giving the people this impression that somehow
you are responsible.
Yes, just don't worry, man. Just we will soon come for it. Then we will continue to have the cycle that we have.
I don't want the time to finish and we not look at Christmas, because Christmas is going to come with its own set of new vendors cropping out of everywhere.
Right.
And new vendors are going to mean new garbage. People are going to be out on the streets more, having a good time, eating, drinking, throwing garbage on the streets. How prepared are you to deal with the Christmas increase?
We will. My biggest problem is not the seasonal garbage that will come out, because we cannot have a plan for that, and that's easy.
What does that plan mean? More trucks, more people?
We usually get out more tipper trucks and stuff like that. We usually do collect deep into the night. We work with the police and everybody, and we go deep into the night. Let's work around the clock at Christmas times. But that's not the issue. What my big problem is to have the backlog that coming out of the rainy season.
Yes.
That come and catch that garbage.
And the rains are continuing.
And the rain seems to be continuing. So we're working like, right now I have trucks on the road as we speak. And we putting in, tomorrow we're putting in right across Jamaica, we're putting in, we just started doing the calls, but we intend to put in at least 100 tipper trucks between now and next week to help to move the backlog out of the way before the Christmas garbage.
Let me ask Chairman if you can afford 100 new trucks on the road that were unbudgeted for. Rain, you never planned for all of this. Can they afford it?
100 tippers, yes, man.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. Irrespective of the fact that we don't get the budget that we want from the ministry, we have a minister who is very supportive. And every time we need money and we go to him, he always finds a way to get that money to us. And without that, we'd have been in some serious problems. So, you know, I have to give kudos to him because he's the one who makes sure in the last 2 years we get over 40 new trucks because of him. If that didn't happen, I guarantee you that garbage would even be here today. Maintenance
is not something that we're going to be talking about next year of those trucks. That's always our difficulty.
Well, the new trucks are being are dealer service, and the 100 new trucks, which is not to be confused with what I just said about the 100 tipper trucks that we're hiring from private people. The 100 new trucks will be all dealer serviced.
When do you get those?
Yes, we intend to get those in 2020. The finance ministry is working on that for us now.
So we're going to see a cleaner Jamaica come 2020?
Absolutely, we'll be cleaner. Once the trucks arrive, our main problem is reliable trucks.
Yeah.
We need 150 thereabout reliable trucks, and I stress reliable. Currently, we have about 43 reliable, that's the new ones. The rest, we have to band-aid them up and tape them up and keep. And they go out, they come down after 2 hours out. We can't get the efficiency that we need. And that's part of what happens.
Give me the final word.
But let me say though, Patria, we had a visit from some Australians a few years ago who had a very good garbage collection system. They said that unless people package and dispose of their garbage properly, you can't have enough trucks in the system anyway. So even when we have the 100 coming in, if people do not take responsibility for containerizing properly and packaging, disposing of their garbage properly, manage it properly, we're still going to have a problem. Not as much as today, but we'll still have an issue.
I think the big takeaway is personal responsibility, and we almost recognize the role that we play in making garbage and also making it go away. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, more On Point. Welcome back to On Point. Now, earlier we had a discussion about the China-Jamaica relationships and some of those investments. But we're not the only countries in the Caribbean benefiting. Take a look at the numbers.
A Hong Kong-based company spent approximately $3 billion developing and expanding a deep water container port in the Bahamas, while the state-owned China Export-Import Bank provided $2.5 billion to build Bahamas' Bahamar Resort and Casino. The Dominican Republic received a $600 million loan from China to expand its electricity grid. China gave Grenada $55 million to build a cricket stadium, and the Cayman Islands received $5.3 billion in Chinese foreign direct investments in 2009.
And our On Point team hit the streets and asked, are you concerned about Jamaica's relationship with China?
I'm not concerned at all. Anything progressive, I'm with it. I too was at China 2 months ago for 2 weeks. It was definitely a learning experience, but I'm not worried about a relationship with China. It's probably a positive. We just need to embrace it.
They are business people, and it's good because they are doing business, and the manufacturer is good. Without them, example, me have go down to buy socks and sell it for myself, but it doesn't, and I China them get it from. So we can't do that with China in the country.
I'm concerned because I want to know what it's all about. What's the sudden, relationship all about? The bond is getting very strong, and I know that they're incorporating a lot in Jamaica. So yeah, I am concerned.
I don't think it's a way forward for us. They need to invest more into our country as a people, in our agriculture, and so that we can flourish. Because we have a good product here. It's just that they're not using it.
Everybody is looking after their own interests, including China and the USA, and so should we. So we have to advance our people to make sure that we have a good life, and if we can engage with partners who are more developed and have opportunities for export and trade and interaction in terms of intellectual development, etc., and infrastructure development, then so be it.
No, I don't trust them. I really don't trust them.
Dennis, two things that we touched on today, the China trip and garbage. Let's deal with the China trip first.
My view on it is that I think that it's just going to be another trip like all the other trips, because we go and we realize demand and we can't meet the demand. We don't have the supply. I mean, even a thing like our tourist industry, the the hotel industry demands a certain consistent level and quality supply of vegetables and fruits. They can't get it for years. We just don't have the capacity because we have not addressed the productivity issues.
So yes, you get your goods there, and then what? Who is going to buy it? And what is the mechanism that's in place to ensure that not only is it sold into a wholesaler, who sells into a retailer, but it's what is there to get it into a Chinese home and get it into a Chinese home a second and a third time. And I don't know that that mechanism has already been built out in a way that's going to certainly for the manufacturer make it worthwhile. I know that some of the legacy brands have been trying to break into Asia for a while. Japan has been the market of choice. A lot of people have been trying to get in sauces and juices and those kinds of things. And it's been a real struggle.
Yeah.
So
but
I can see where China is going to be a difficulty.
I tell you something though. I think there's more potential for us in maximizing our tourism market in terms of import substitution and growth. For example, one simple example, the hip strip.
You're big on it.
If we can remove the crime around that and create a Las Vegas type scene, automatically without doing anything else, you double your room rates. So you're doubling your value without any input.
But you see, and I agree with you that there is work that can be done on this side, and that's low-hanging fruit. But I believe in export because, and I'll go back to something that I said to Dan, the dollar right now is 142 and change. And we keep bemoaning this whole, we need to do the import substitution. But if we export exponentially more, we earn foreign exchange, and we have the same kind of impact on the dollar.
The problem, Patria, is that the tourism industry and fixing that is a lower hanging fruit.
Agreed.
And you get foreign exchange from that.
Agreed.
So for example, you look at an alligator pond or those places, we don't have access roads. You understand? So people come and demand it, but they can't access it.
I think it's important that we look at multiple fronts, and in the same way that the dependence on tourism, and we panic when we hear that there is issue in US politics and British politics because that's where our tourists come from. In the same way, I don't want us to put all our eggs in one basket. And we cannot depend on just the 3 million people here and the 4-point-something million tourists that come here to sustain industry. There's a big world.
No, but it can. It can do it's more sustainable than the exports. In my view, I'll give you another example that can actually help us more with our foreign exchange situation than the niche exporting we do. It's a good public transportation system.
Agreed. But there's some people now, manufacturers especially, who will tell you that only 10% of what they make is sold in Jamaica. They're making their money outside of this country, and they have no desire to change that ratio.
The problem is that a 5% increase in tourism is more than a 100% increase in non-traditional.
Well, that's a conversation to be had. The other matter is garbage, and that's one that you're close to. And people have fairs with Christmas coming up, seasonal vendors, people, just the volume of people on the road, people just wanting to get out and have some fun. And attendant with that is drink a juice, throw it on the ground. Eat a chicken, throw it on the ground. It's a fair.
Yeah, it is. But last year we actually managed it well, with less trucks than we have this year. The problem, as Audley said, is the rains and the traffic congestion.
Backlog.
The two main issues, rain and traffic congestion, because irrespective of how many trucks you have, if you can't move, you can't collect. And that is the issue.
What's the hope for event planners? So part of the garbage issue during Christmas certainly is there is a party.
Yeah, we don't really have a lot of issue with them,
You don't?
No, because, most times they're planned properly, and, if we ensure that they contract with private collectors, so they're planned properly. So we don't really have an issue. The big problem, as I say, is the rains and the movement on the roads. Because if you think about Patriot, you as a private citizen, because of the traffic congestion, you're taking double the amount of time to get to where you want to go.
Imagine the truck.
Imagine the truck.
caught between a rock and a hard place because we want the rains. Heaven knows the farmers need it, the gardeners need it, Jamaica needs it, but I understand the issues. That's where we're going to have to wrap the show today, folks. Got to say a big thank you to everybody who made the show happen. Thank you to the hardworking crew who show up and put out every single week. Thanks to you, the viewers who tune in. We'll be here next week to do it all over again. I'm Patria Kay.
And I'm Dennis Chung.
Have a good one.
On Point was brought to you by Dodgen Global.